Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. My guest today is Brigitte Gemme, and she is going to show you how you can do weekend prep, even if you hate cooking, but if you want to eat really well. Please welcome her to the show. Hello, how are you and where are you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, so a little bit further north from you. Just getting ready for a summer of forest fires, unfortunately, which to me highlights again the importance of eating this way to do our little bit, right?
Oh no, I love your apron. I'm guessing that's the name of your company, Vegan Family Kitchen.
You got it. Yeah, it's my superhero cape though, and I wear it in the front. It's a really important part of, especially for people like I'm not someone who loves cooking. I want to make that clear. But when I put on my cape, my apron, my costume, I step into the role of someone who cooks, someone who loves to cook. So it's a big part for me of the ritual of cooking is just to put the thing on and get in the mindset for cooking. So
Nice. Well, it says Vegan Family Kitchen. So do you have a vegan family?
I do. I have a couple kids that will eventually walk in here, but they've been warned not to come and get snacks until the end. And they're now age 9 and 12, so it makes it a lot easier. And my husband, who's a very hungry person, he cycles his head off every day for many hours. And so we all live together here in Vancouver, and everybody is plant-based. Not everybody is ready to get a vegan tattoo, you know. But certainly we only eat plants, so that's really
That's
awesome.
funny that you mentioned that because I was in Portland once speaking at the Portland Veg Fest, and I didn't even realize that tattoos are not always vegan, that apparently they use non-vegan ink in some tattoos. Who
I
knew?
know it's kind of gross when you think about it, but
Yeah.
that in your body. But yeah, I don't have a tattoo.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
No, I understood. But how old were you? Were not you? You can tell me how old you were if you want, but how old were your children when you transitioned them to a plant-based diet? And I'd love to hear your story of when you became plant-based and why.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I was living in California. My ancestors, my grandfather, probably my great grandfather, had a dairy farm. When my mother married my dad and my grandfather died, my dad operated the dairy farm for a while. When I was born, we had pigs, which isn't great by any stretch of the imagination. I think my dad was scared of dealing with the big animals. You know, it can get aggressive or violent. Anyway, so eventually, thankfully, my parents got sold the farm with the animals, and they started a greenhouse business, for vegetable plants and flowers and things. So that was way more peaceful. But I came from a background of somebody who thinks animals are there for us. I was definitely not a vegetarian or a vegan that had these ideas about animal rights or anything. But I very much considered myself an eco-friendly citizen and wanting to do my part and recycling and getting around by bike and all that. And sometime in 2013, I was living in California just for a short time, and it was a big drought. And climate was really on my mind. And I started learning more about the environmental footprint of food. And I was shocked and I was embarrassed because as somebody who was quite educated, it was like, wait, what? I've been neglecting all this for all those years and, preaching about biking around and all that, but not thinking about what I was eating. And so I decided to go mostly plant-based at that time. And at the time, my daughter was 1.5. So she started eating tofu, like plain uncooked tofu. She loved it. She thought it was great. And my husband was not exactly on board at the beginning, but he likes good food and he ate a variety of things and he was eating whatever he wanted outside the house. So I guess that was fine. And it took 2 years for me to go fully plant-based all around all the time. And that happened when my son was born. And by that stage, I had reconsidered my thoughts about dairy cows in particular. And I was breastfeeding my son like he was a, infant. And I was sitting in bed in the middle of the night, as you do when you're breastfeeding a tiny baby. And I realized, what if somebody came and like took my son because he was a boy, so useless from a dairy industry perspective, and took him away. And from that morning on, I decided that I would be vegan and there would be no more exceptions for me, and that would be the way it would be. And interestingly enough, the whole time I was thinking that people were overblowing the health aspect. Vegans must be making these claims up just to drum up their cause or something. And my father got really sick, and I started paying a lot more attention to the studies linking dementia, heart disease, cancers, and those different things to diet. And that's when I became a lot more committed to a practically fully whole foods plant-based diet. It's not like we came from a place of sickness. We were athletic and youngish and in good shape and not having any health problems. But clearly, even the little things we had have disappeared. So it's really been great for us. And to this day, my big battle remains dairy. It's the one thing that I just cannot fathom how much we depend on it still. And I'm really very much hoping that in the next 20, 25 years, maybe dairy will be a thing of the past for most people anyway. But one can dream. So I guess it's been almost 10 years now. My son is 9, just turned 9. So it's been almost 10 years on this journey.
That's amazing. Now, you said you're from Canada. Is there such a thing as, like, we have the standard American diet? Is there a standard Canadian diet? And is that what you grew up eating?
I guess it's quite similar, the standard Canadian diet to the standard American diet. However, I had the good luck of growing on that, mostly vegetable farm. We had an asparagus field in the backyard, also lots of potatoes that were growing right there. For me, asparagus, like, you cut it and you cook it for lunch. Like, you don't eat it 3 days after. Like, to me, 3-day-old asparagus is nonsensical even. So I was lucky to have a lot of fresh vegetables, fresh tomatoes, fresh cucumbers, fresh bell peppers, green beans. We hated removing the weeds from the beans, my brother and I, but we just ate the thing as we went. So though there was certainly meat practically at every meal, and my father had a ham sandwich every single day of his life. And even when he went into dementia, it was easy when, the doctor asked you, what did you have for lunch yesterday? He always remembered a ham sandwich every day of his life. So that was a big part of our lives. But my mother is also very health conscious. A long time ago, like for 30, 40 years, my mom has been having chia seeds in her diet. That was not really a thing for most people. So I think I had the benefit of lots of veggies and also lots of kind of those health forward habits. And my mom is the Energizer bunny. So clearly those chia seeds have done something for her. It's working.
Had you ever heard of a vegan or a plant-based diet growing up?
Oh no, gosh. I was vaguely aware that vegetarians existed, but I met the first vegetarian in my life when I was, I think, 19 years old. And that's when I moved from, our more countryside to the city. And this is somebody I was working with. And I vividly remember today, we had this little Lebanese supermarket close to the office, and he went there and he bought tahini, and he would dip his pita bread in tahini. I think he was probably mostly vegan, but that wasn't even really on the radar. So that was 30 something years ago, almost 30 years ago. And I thought he was so weird. It was so bizarre for me. It was not at all part of the culture. This idea that animals would be anything other than either wild or food, so it was a bit of a shock to me 10 years later to realize how ignorant I was about all things related to animal agriculture. I knew the facts. I knew how milk was made. I knew where it came from. I knew where pig meat came from, but I never really connected the dots until my early 30s. So it's never too late to make a change, even if you come from a background like me. Like, I liked blue cheese and blue steak, raw, rare, just seared steak together, preferably. And I've come a long way from that. Now, just imagining that, like, real cheese in my mouth goes like, bah, bah. I can't imagine doing that anymore.
No, I agree. It's never too late to make a change. So what is the Vegan Family Kitchen?
It's my little space on the internet where I want to be the voice who tells people cooking makes a difference. Home cooking, the food we make, I want to put the value back into not just nice, fancy recipes. I don't post a lot of recipes proper. What I do is I teach people how to cook, to see the grammar, the structure, the syntax behind the recipes. Because at the end of the day, making soup is making soup. There's, I don't know, millions of soup recipes on the internet, but most of them function pretty much the same way. And that's what I try to help people see, to see how different dishes are made so they can get better at improvising, at opening the fridge, pulling what's out there, at putting the right thing in their fridge as well. And to support them in doing that, the thing my mother always said, the worst thing about dinner, it's not cooking, it's not doing the dishes, it's deciding what to make. And that was so hard for me in 2015 when I went fully vegan and was like, what am I going to cook? It occupied so many of my brain cycles. And so at the time, a couple of years later, I decided to start a vegan meal planning service where I make those decisions for people. And it's really a 1 year collection of meal plans, but at the same time, it's also what I like to see as a cooking course, because I like to point out from 1 week to the next, hey, this is a soup again, but we've changed it using more seasonal vegetables as the seasons go through, thinking of roughly 4 seasons. So that's the main thing I do still today. I also have monthly workshops where I teach different skills. Batch cooking is my favorite thing to save my butt as a mom of 2 and person who's quite busy. If I did not do my batch cooking, I don't know what we would eat on weekdays. I don't know if I could stick to my principles. I could stick to vegan, that would be easy, but stick to healthy vegan, not so sure. And that's where really valuing cooking, putting the time. And my favorite thing in the entire world, my favorite way to spend part of my weekend is I have a cooking club, a healthy vegan batch cooking club, and we get together every other Sunday on Zoom, kind of like this. And everybody's doing their own thing. Like I'm not teaching, I'm just cooking like everybody else. But we have this appointment. It's like going to the gym together. And we're getting our workout together. We're doing the reps. We're making the soups, cooking the grains, preparing the beans. And it's nice to have these other people that are on the same page as each other, supporting each other, just seeing that we're not alone in our little kitchen, that we're all committed and moving in the right direction together. So that's super fun. It actually used to be a paid program, and now I've made it free because I just want people to be there. And I like having company in the kitchen.
Make sure you give me the information for us to put in the show notes that people can
Oh,
find
yeah.
out about that, because that sounds absolutely fabulous. I couldn't agree with you more about batch cooking. I think that's the secret to any kind of eating, whatever the dietary style is, because I don't know how people can just go to work all day and come home and then expect dinner to just manifest.
Yeah, manifesting dinner. It doesn't work. The alternative is to buy it partly made by somebody else who really, this is going to sound harsh, but they don't care about us. They care about the bottom line. And even the nice little restaurant at the corner of the street, even if La Mama Italiana is making your food, at the end of the day, they're in the business of selling food, not in the business of making you healthy, right? And so when we outsource, and of course, to say nothing of the big food conglomerates that, don't even care at all. Actually, they care because if you get sick, they're also, stakeholders in the big pharma companies. So they're good, either way. So I think the people who care the most, who have the most to gain from good food, it's ourselves. So we have to make this commitment. We can't just pass the buck and let somebody else deal with it. We have to do it.
Absolutely. So what kind of tips and tricks do you have for cooking for people that hate to cook?
There's really a mindset change that needs to happen. I think the first step for many of us will be understanding how come we hate to cook. Like, what, why? Like, how did this come about? Like, is there anything more important than cooking? We have to remember that our whole bodies are made of the food we eat. Some people don't know that, but every cell in our body, practically, there's some exceptions, but it's really minimal. Every cell is replaced all the time, even when we're older, like me or others. You don't age, but I do. And so most of my cells, like they're 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, at most 3 months. Even the cells in our bones, like the old stuff gets thrown away and new cells get built all the time. And what do they get built from? The food we eat. And when we visualize that, we realize how important it is, how valued that food that we eat should be. And unfortunately, as we were just saying, the commercial forces have made it so that homemade food doesn't count. It doesn't count in the GDP. It doesn't count by any economic measure there is. It doesn't create jobs when people who care cook their own food. And so we've internalized that. we're bathed in advertising. In Canada, I don't think they're called like that in the US, but in Canada, we have two really big food delivery system, like Uber food, you know, but one of them is called Just Eat, and the other one is called Skip the Dishes. Genius names, and it
I love
totally
that. Skip the
reflects.
dishes. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's genius, right? Because we've come to think of, oh, the dishes, ooh, you know, I don't want to do that. But we're forgetting how basically we've been brainwashed to think that it's not important, when in fact it is the most important thing there is. So if you hate cooking, I think having a deep look at where your food is from, having that kind of, you know, Buddhists often say, look deeply, you know, look at a sweet potato and imagine everything that happened for that sweet potato to be there, and all the way to the rays of the sun and the formation of the universe. I mean, when you can go quite deep in that, and you realize how grateful we can be for that. And feeling gratitude is a scientifically proven way to improve our commitment to improving our habits. So that's definitely one thing. And changing that mindset, seeing the value, also seeing that a lot of feminine care kinds of tasks, practices like cooking have been systematically devalued. And we've embodied that. Like, we have big celebrations for women astronauts, and I'm really excited that there's women going to the moon. However, cooking a meal is equally important. It's not rocket science, it's just more important than rocket science. And we need to celebrate that and see again how we've internalized those mindsets that devalue the work that historically mostly women have made, and reclaim those skills. And as I was saying earlier, then you can go into the more little tweaks. I find that whenever I put on my apron, I put on my superhero cape. I'm the person who's going to come and save the world with cooking, and it makes a difference. Every meal makes a difference. So that's a big part of it. I like having a power song. So lots of people have a Google kind of assistant or Alexa or something in the kitchen these days. So I walk in and I say, hey, you, I don't want to call them right now because they'll respond. Hey, you, play my cooking energy playlist. And, you know, you can have songs like The Eye of the Tiger, you know, the rocky theme songs, or something more destructive, if that's your style. You know, there's lots of associating cooking with this empowering music. It really works. And something else I like too is, if you struggle with this idea of going in the kitchen, associating something you really like a guilty pleasure, with cooking. For example, listening to podcasts about true crime. You know, I know a lot of people love that. So you only get to listen to true crime podcasts if you're cooking, and you create the association. And after a little while, you're going to look forward to cooking because that's your special time to listen to true crime. For me, it's calling my mom. I get in the kitchen, 5 p.m. to cook. I call my mom. I've done so practically every day since 2018 or something. And it makes I look forward to going cooking because I call my mom. I was traveling recently. I was in Japan, so very much in the wrong time zone. And I got out there to cook dinner, and I was like, oh, I can't call my mom now because it's the middle of the night for her. But it's good to have that association. And maybe one last one, cooking with other people. If you're going to do batch cooking, joining a cooking club, forming a cooking club with some friends who want to do it, and even something as silly as watching cooking videos, but not just watching them, just putting them there and cooking with them as if you had an imaginary friend. It works as well. It's called body doubling, something in the ADHD community that a lot of people do. So they watch someone studying and they study at the same time. Well, it works for cooking too. So, but the key is that you can't just watch. Stop just watching food porn. You know, you have to do the thing, cooking yourself.
Right. Yeah, I love what you said about doing something that you love even more. That's how I trick myself into finally exercising, is when I'm on the spin bike, then I'll watch a juicy show on Netflix, but no other time I have to be spinning on the bike.
Exactly. Create that association. And we're silly. We love stickers, you know, we still love gold stars. So having those little rewards that give us a little pat in the back, reminding ourselves, you know, take pictures and post on social media, and all your friends are going to be like, oh, wow, I wish I was healthy like you. Well, just show up and cook and you'll be healthy like me. You know, we can do it together.
Yep, cooking, the forgotten art form. You know, I grew up with a mother and a grandmother, and everybody loved to cook, and they did cook. So I learned to love to cook early on. I find it very therapeutic and even relaxing. So it's always curious to me how when people just say they absolutely hate it, I think they just never did it.
That's part of the story for sure. I think there's a lot of false expectations around what cooking is supposed to look like. And I think it can be quite tricky for many people to compare themselves to what that cooking is. And I also encounter younger people. So I'm in my mid 40s, people in their 20s, just like many people of my generation have been cut from the practice of growing our food. You know, since probably the 60s, it's quite uncommon for most people to grow their food. I think we've come to a stage where the practice of cooking has been that link has been cut off. Food is something that somehow appears on the table, and it seems so quaint or so inaccessible or so something that I can't possibly do. And maybe my top number one trick is keep it simple. And I mean, the cookbooks are beautiful. I love to read them too, but most of them are just way too complex for the average, complete beginner. So really learning to discover the basic ingredients, learning how they taste, and then you can kind of ramp it up from there. But learning to appreciate simple foods, and it is a transition, it's an acquired taste because our taste buds have been bombarded with fireworks kinds of foods, right? But once we get a little bit more acquainted with food as it is, we can learn to appreciate the subtle differences. But it's definitely something that has slipped out of the culture for many, many people, and we need to make space for it.
Right, absolutely. I think, the part of the success of the blue zones is they don't eat fast food. They don't really eat processed food. They cook their food, they share meals together.
And sadly, it's starting to go. We were in Costa Rica a few years back. It's been about maybe 5 years since we went there in Guanacaste, where it's supposed to be a blue zone, but now, there's a lot of fast food in the slightly bigger cities. So it's starting to vanish. The researcher himself, I think Dan Butner, was saying, there's starting to be a softening of the blue zones because those habits are maybe not passed on because people get more into capitalistic food. I'm sorry, I'm a sociologist. That's my background. So that's, the forces of the economy are pushing all over the world. So we have to reclaim it. It's an act of revolution, a revolutionary rebel act to cook. And if that's what motivates you to be a little bit against the grain, then go for it.
Yeah. So do you have any it looks like you have something set up you're going to show us. So kind of like what some of your techniques are.
Yeah. So I was thinking of showing a really simple batch cooking session with just what I call the minimum viable prep, which is preparing some building blocks. So I know there's people that like to do meal prep where they have these nice matching containers and everything is all set up for them and they pop, I guess, the container in the microwave and they just eat exactly what it is. I can't stand that. I like to have the feeling that my food is fresh when I cook it. But at the same time, I just can't cook everything fresh. Like, who has time to cook brown rice on a weeknight? It takes a long time. And so I need to do certain things in advance to just pop them out of the fridge. So I know they're good. I know I made them from Whole Foods, but they're very simple. And then I can assemble them for dinner. And especially for people who are cooking just for one or two, I think it also helps to have those building blocks there because otherwise it's easy to go back to eating cereal with a bit of soy milk or something. Oh, it's just me, it's not worth it. No, it's you. You're so worth it. You need to have good food to show up in the world. So that's why I like to have the basics. What I was thinking about doing was quickly cooking a little bit of quinoa, following the pasta method, which is a different way than most people cook quinoa, and also roasting some sweet potatoes because they are so amazing, and tofu slices as well, and roasted tofu slices. That's right. And while we're waiting for all that to go, we can get the slow cooker started and have soup. Soup is the one thing that we should have at least one or two made of ahead of time every week. It's always healthy. You put the beans, you put the vegetables, there's lots of liquid, it makes you feel full. It's a great vehicle for all the vitamins to come into your body. So I like to have soup. It's easy to warm up, for your lunches, one pot deal, but you can have it as an appetizer before dinner. It fills you up a bit. So I think that's a really cool thing to do in the prep too. And if there was more time, but I don't think that will happen today, I would also mix a dressing really quickly with tahini, lemon, maybe a date in there. If you have a Vitamix, it opens up possibilities to make it a little sweeter without using any kind of refined sugar. And so you blend the dressing, and all of that, maybe not the first time, but if the second or third time you do it, it is easy to do in under an hour. And what's an hour in the big picture? And it's so much more efficient. So that means you have fewer dishes to do. So that's what I think we could do today.
Well, I agree with you. What's an hour? Because the people that say they don't have time to cook or batch cook are spending hours just doom scrolling on social media. So if you have a social media account, you have an hour to do some healthy food prep every week.
Absolutely. If you've kept up with what's happening with TikTok, for example, and you're aware that there's issues with TikTok right now, that means you're not spending enough time cooking, And I just realized I forgot to start some water for the quinoa. So I'm getting that going here. Definitely. And I mean, there are people who really have serious struggles with time, that either they have to work multiple jobs, they maybe don't even have a proper kitchen to keep their food or to keep cooking implements. They have parents to care for and young children. I mean, those challenges are there. It's true. And if you know anybody that has those challenges, make a pot of soup for them, But if you don't have those challenges, then it means you need to step it up a bit. And that's, I hate to use the tough love approach, but I think we need to be serious about how important this is and just do it.
Yep.
So should we cook?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the key when doing this kind of batch cooking session is to start along the lines of the critical path. So anybody here who's ever done project management in software or construction knows about the idea of critical path, which is what is it that's going to take the longer and that has to be done first so that the other aspects can be, hooked in after. And so in this case, for example, before we started talking, I started the oven because the oven needs to be hot to put the stuff in it. So that was the first step. I had forgotten to put my water to boil to cook the quinoa, but that's another step. So I've started the oven. I've started the quinoa lentil mix. So the step to do now is to put in the sweet potatoes because they take about 35 minutes to cook. So it's important to get them going. So I've just got a baking sheet here, and they don't need anything. I mean, sweet potatoes, I sharpened my knife earlier. That's also very much on the critical path. So sweet potatoes are just so delicious and they don't need anything done to them. The other week, my husband was arguing with me. He could not believe that I hadn't done anything to the sweet potatoes. And I was like, I swear, I just did this. I cut them in half and put them in the oven and that's it. So that I think is really key. The happiness is to have some sweet potatoes for the week. And these are going to be awesome in either a bowl kind of set up with the quinoa that I was just mentioning, but they can also go really well with anything kind of Tex-Mex. I like to put the sweet potatoes with black beans and maybe a little salsa, or I make just a cashew cream, and it's quite awesome. I'm just going to hide myself view here. I have a feeling that, yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, can you hear me again?
Yes, very well.
What I was going to say is I cook like you. I don't necessarily do recipes very often, but I cook the components and then we can just assemble them and have a variety of different recipes.
Exactly. And so here are the sweet potatoes. I'm just going to pop them in. Great. So that's the first step. The other step, I don't think I mentioned. Oh no, I gotta get the quinoa ready. So, and I have a special trick for quinoa. Is I like quinoa. It's nice to have, but I like to do something extra with it. Is I add red lentils, and the red lentils just disappear. And I just started doing that after reading about our microbiome and how it likes to eat so many different things. And not every single week do we have a dish that has featured red lentils, but we can just sneak them in other places. And I've put red lentils in pizza dough. I've put red lentils with quinoa, with brown rice, with just anything that is red-ish. You can add some red lentils and they disappear, and it just makes one extra food that feeds your microbiome every week. So I look like I'm measuring, but that's another trip. That's another habit from the vegan family kitchen, is that I hardly measure anything. I just eyeball stuff. And one thing I like is when you're not yet familiar with cooking too much, I like to take a teaspoon of, let's say, not turmeric because it's really messy. Let's say cumin. So take a teaspoon of cumin and put it in the palm of your hand. And what is a teaspoon of cumin? And then you get a really good feel for it. And next time you cook, you don't have again to measure the cumin, because the reality is that you're not cooking in a Michelin star restaurant. It doesn't matter if your reviews say that your style is inconsistent. You know, nobody is going to say, last week I had this dish at Brigitte's kitchen and it didn't taste the same. Nobody cares. Okay, so just learn to eyeball things. And you can, after doing a teaspoon, you do a tablespoon of cumin, and you realize a tablespoon of cumin is a lot more than a teaspoon. And getting that kind of feeling for the ballpark amounts that things need to be into. And so in this case, for example, I have mostly quinoa and a little bit of red lentils. I'm mixing them together. Did I measure? No. And what I'm doing is I'm cooking them using the pasta method. And that's something that comes from the research on brown rice. You've probably talked about this before. There's unfortunately some brown rice crops that have arsenic in them. And to get rid of the arsenic, you can just cook the brown rice like pasta. And when I first read about that, I realized I could be liberated from having to remember the ratios. Because remember, I don't really like cooking. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to the kitchen. I don't want to have to remember that to cook quinoa, it's 1.25 the volume of, actual quinoa in water. Or if you're doing brown rice, it should be more like 1.5, or maybe, don't ask me, I don't know. I don't keep up. I don't keep track of cooking times really either. I just practice tasting the food, and I cook the quinoa like I would cook pasta. And then when it's ready, and then when it looks ready, I taste it. If it's ready, I drain it and it's done. So I find this very liberating to cook this way. So I'm just rinsing the quinoa here and the lentils. They're always dusty. And sometimes they have saponin. This one doesn't look like it has any. These days, most quinoa is supposed to be rinsed, but actually I've discovered a few times when the quinoa was supposed to be rinsed and it wasn't. So I never take a chance, because quinoa that tastes like soap is really not good and it ruins your dinner. So I don't take a chance. So the quinoa is just waiting for the water to boil. That's my next step. So while this is happening, I don't need to sit around and scroll social media, though I could. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to prepare some tofu. I like to have, and my kids love to munch on slices of tofu. It's a little bit kind of like jerky, I guess, to some people. I like to cook it until it's chewy. So that's more like in the 40-minute range at 375. And so I just dip the tofu slices in a concoction of balsamic vinegar and blackstrap molasses, because it's so full of iron. So it gives a little bit of a sweeter taste. But molasses is it's kind of a tablespoon ingredient. It's not a quarter cup ingredient. So I just put a little bit with the balsamic vinegar and the coconut aminos. And I don't press my tofu now. I know some people have all sorts of contraptions about pressing tofu, but I just wrap it in a towel like this, push down on it a little bit, and I call it the day. That is good enough for me. There we go.
It looks like you have an air fryer behind you. Am I correct?
You are correct. It's a giant air fryer, perfect for family food. Yeah, air fried tofu is what I admit I have done a lot recently, because I just dice up a block of tofu and pop it in there. And the one thing I really love above everything in the air fryer, I have an Asian supermarket close to me that sells bean curd that is pressed like a brick of tofu kind of thing, but it's bean curd. it has more fiber than just the normal tofu. And it's when it cooks, it becomes a little bit fluffy and separated. It's really good. But I said I was lazy. And so to make seasoned tofu in the air fryer means I need to clean the air fryer after more often. So especially with using a little bit of molasses. So I do this in the oven on a baking sheet with just a bit of parchment paper on my sheet here. But I know you're a big fan of the air fryer. What's your favorite way to do the tofu?
Well, unfortunately, I'm allergic to soy, but I'm
Oh,
sure.
no.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure if I wasn't, it would have to be air fried.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing is that it's kind of loud, the air fryer. So I don't like to do live cooking with the air fryer because then it causes a bit of a background noise. So I'm just using a little bit of coconut aminos here. Again, I'm eyeballing it. It's about 2 tablespoons. You can't really see, but you have to take my word for it. I'm putting a little bit more of the balsamic vinegar. Here we go.
Is that just a regular balsamic vinegar, like 6%, or in Canada, are you able to get the reduced ones as well?
You can get balsamic reduction. This is just a regular one, but it's not even what's in the bottle because I try to aim for zero waste. I'm definitely not living zero waste, but I try to go towards that. So most of my condiments get refilled from our local refill store. So a lot of them, I have no idea what it actually is. I know that it's organic or not, for example. Usually they have that information, but I'm not sure what the brand is. Or usually they say, do you want this one or this one? And I pick the most expensive because it's usually an indication that it might be a little bit more carefully created, but you never know for sure. And I just love my big ass bottle of molasses here. They sell it in little containers, but this is 1.33 kilo is like 2.5 pounds. Like it's a lot of molasses. And I put some of this every day in my overnight oats. So I feel like it takes care of at least part of my iron requirements, right? Yep. I just love this stuff.
You don't have to answer this now, but almost every guest on Chef AJ Live gets the question, what you eat in a day.
Yeah. Oh, I can answer while I cut my tofu. If I find my knife, right. What did I do with my knife? Is this going? Yeah. Another just a tip first about batch cooking is to keep your ears open. So the batch cooking with earphones is not great, but it's really good to keep an ear out because the different things when they cook, you can tell how advanced they are by the sounds they're making. And so, for example, I'm listening here for is my water boiling at the same time as I'm doing something else, which is another, that's the number one tip. Write that in the sky. To cook faster, everybody needs to know this. Get your phone out of the kitchen, okay? Like people just go on their phone because supposedly they need a recipe, but they don't need a recipe because really they know how to make soup, but they feel they need a recipe. And they have their phone and then, oops, there's a notification. Oops, I'm waiting for the pasta to boil, so I'm going to check if there's new reels. And then you get distracted. If you had done the dishes instead while you were waiting, you would be so much further ahead, right? But having those slot machines in our pockets is really triggering a lot of delays in the kitchen in so many different ways. So what do I eat in a day as I cut the tofu here in slices of, is that about 1/4 inch? I think that's what you would call it. Maybe 3-4 millimeters. Is every single day I have the same breakfast. I'm super boring. And it consists of a combination of chia seeds with oats. And I have some beautiful oats from a local farm to us here. I get it's community supported agriculture and I get my share of oats every fall. And they're so delicious. They're rolled oats with chia seeds and usually homemade soy milk. Just because I'm lazy, I said I don't like carrying heavy soy milk containers from the grocery store on my bike or on foot, or even from my parking lot to my home. And so I like to make my own soy milk, and I do that. And I add about 2 teaspoons worth of flaxseed, so part of the daily dozen, and it's just good. I guess it adds a nice nutty taste to it. And cinnamon, because spices are underrated and we always should have some kind of spice. So cinnamon works for me for breakfast. So I do that the night before, and literally it takes 75 seconds to prepare it the night before, to let it sit on the stove and wait. And then when I get up in the morning, I microwave that just for a minute because I like it to be lukewarm. I add frozen blueberries. So the frozen blueberries right away, they come to temperature. And whatever fruit. So as I make my kids' lunch boxes in the morning, there's going to be pieces of fruit kicking around, strawberries or maybe banana, grape, whatever. So I put those in it, and it makes a really hearty breakfast. It's quite generous, but it works for me, and it carries me through to 11:30 or noon when it's time for me to eat. And the quinoa water is boiling, so I'm going to pop the drained quinoa here into the pot that's boiling. So this is really cooking just like pasta. Watch your ears. There we go. And remembering to give it a stir. My favorite tool is to have the spatula with the straight edge. That is awesome when deglazing pots. That's really important, but also at any moment, just scraping the bottom to make sure that nothing sticks. And I'm just going to turn down the heat a tiny bit. And where did Siri go? Hey, Siri. Is Siri there? Anyway, we'll set a 12-minute timer on the quinoa. That's about right. I wouldn't necessarily need a timer if I wasn't at the same time chit-chatting, but because we're talking here, I want to make sure that I don't forget completely about my quinoa. So in 12 minutes, I'm going to taste it and see that the little rings have detached, that it's not grainy anymore. And then I'll drain it and put it back in the hot pot with the lid on, and that will allow it to finish steaming. So you've seen me mix my little sauce with the coconut aminos, and I'm just dipping this. I don't feel the need to marinate. I think tofu, here's my TED talk about tofu. Tofu is good because it is tofu, not just because it tastes like meat. So if you like tofu to taste like meat, that's okay. But I really like tofu to taste like tofu. And I think one of the key aspects here is to have this contrast between the outer layer that has the seasoning of the tofu and the inner part of the tofu that is white and doesn't have much flavor. And it's a texture thing. You know, people sometimes say, oh, tofu doesn't taste like anything, but mozzarella cheese doesn't taste like anything either.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's make t-shirts that say that, you know, and baseball caps. But people love, I'm from Quebec. I'm from the place where they invented poutine, okay? And poutine cheese is exactly like tofu, except it's made with cow's milk. And it has the same kind of squeaky texture to it, and it does not taste like anything at all. But people love poutine anyway. How come? So that is the key to me. So I like to have some flavor on the outside. And I guess that's another place where the air fryer is great. But honestly, when I prepare tofu in the air fryer, first of all, I'll do it just before dinner. I don't like to reheat it that way so well. It's personal preference, but mostly I like to have that contrast between the outside, in this case, a little bit umami, salty, slightly sweet crust of the tofu, and then the inside that is just white and plain and different. And that's what makes it appealing and interesting. And while I'm here, I can also do another TED Talk. Hands are the most underrated kitchen tool. So I know it's tempting to buy kitchen tools because if we buy a kitchen tool, we must be the kind of person who cooks, right? And that's the same thing as wearing an apron. You know, having a food processor, however, does not make you a cook, but having a knife and using it, that is what makes you a cook. So it's useful to have hands instead of just, you know, fancy gadgets, that you can feel how the food and, you know, how it feels when it's not cooked, how it feels when it's cooked. You can feel the temperature of it. Is it a little bouncy? And the good news is that when we cook all plants, there's no salmonella. You know, the number one benefit of going vegan maybe is not having to handle raw chicken. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with this anymore. And I remember even the days when there was a thing that said you had to wash your chicken and under running water. And of course, it was splattering, E. coli and salmonella everywhere. I mean, that's disgusting, but we don't have that in a vegan kitchen. So we can use our hands all we want. Of course, we need to wash them on a regular basis, but a clean hand is just as good as any fork or a spoon or even knife in some cases. Whew. All right. So just like that, we've got the quinoa going, the tofu, and the sweet potatoes. So that's already, even if I stopped here, even if that was the end of it, I would already have a lot more done. And that was 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes that I've been actually actively cooking. So it makes such a world of difference. Having done that, I think I'm going to
How
start
often do you
soup
do
in the coastal cooker. Go ahead. Sorry, what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have like a certain day of week that you like to do the prep, or like for me, because I work at home, I don't have a certain day that I have to do it. I just kind of wait till the last sweet potato. I'm on the last sweet potato, then I batch cook some more sweet potatoes, kind of thing.
I love that. That's awesome. I'm at this phase of my life where Monday to Friday and weekend days are very regimented. My kids are at the age where they want to sign up for all the things, but they cannot physically necessarily get there by themselves. And so having to follow a schedule for us is really key right now. And routine is good. Like routine, having a reminder, hey, it's Sunday, it's batch cooking day. And the way I've organized it for myself is because the meal plans are created, they come 2 weeks at a time. There's always week A, week B, the odd week, the even week numbered. And in each plan, there's a big batch cooking session where there's usually 6, 7 steps. And some of them will involve doing things like a vegan spaghetti sauce, like a bolognese kind of sauce. And we make enough that there's some left for the second week. So whatever is not eaten this week, I freeze for the following week. And you're going to eat it again, but in a different format. So for example, in the first week, maybe it was on pasta. Well, maybe the second week, it will be on roasted portobello mushrooms or whatever it is. Some other, or a gnocchi, or some other way to serve that bolognese sauce. So the first prep is the big one. And the second prep is usually just a couple of little things like preparing a dressing or making cashew cream, the kinds of things that if I need to do them on a weeknight, it's not the end of the world. And so having that rhythm means that we have cooking club every other week. So 100% prepping every other Sunday. So for me, the coming Sunday is when it's happening, and then in 2 weeks and so forth. And the other prep, I don't always do it. It depends. So that's, but having that one big one done means that there's at least a soup, at least a stew. There's a big batch of whole grains, whether it's quinoa or brown rice or something like that, and roasted vegetables. And the second week, it's like living on leftovers and rejigging everything so that they're new and interesting meals, despite having been cooked 10 days ago and maybe having been frozen in between. And also really focusing on eating things like salads or whatever requires crispy vegetables early in the week, because I always shop on Saturday. So I want to eat the crispy vegetables on Monday or Tuesday. I don't leave them until Friday because I know that by then as well, my energy is lower. So if I need to cook things like asparagus on a Friday, not only the asparagus will be sad, but I will have less energy and less likely to do it. So
yeah. So you do freeze some of the things that you're batch cooking.
yes, I do. Yeah. Usually I will make really big batches of stuff, especially, the obvious, like stews and soups, and cashew cream actually freezes really well. So whenever I make cashew cream, I do a big batch. What else do I freeze? I freeze everything. I think obviously, maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but stir fries, anything that needs to be crispy, crunchy doesn't freeze. Those things don't come out of the freezer in the best shape. But a lot of the food, you add the crunch after. Something I like to do, I call vegan parm nuts, just walnuts mixed in with a little nutritional yeast and garlic powder. And that's the crunchy part of the bolo sauce, right? That's what adds the interesting aspect. So it doesn't need to be crunchy when it's frozen, but the crunchy part is added after. I think adding a little bit of crunch makes every meal more interesting. But yeah, not the freezing part. Whole grains, when they're cooked, also freeze really well. And that was a big discovery for me when I realized that I could freeze brown rice. Because as I mentioned earlier, brown rice takes a while to cook. But I can cook 4 cups of dry brown rice at a time, adding a little bit of red lentils as well in this big pasta pot of mine here. And then when I take it out, I drain it, and there's obviously way too much for just a week, but I freeze some of it and it's perfect to eat, next week, in 2 weeks, or anytime later. I just let it thaw. I guess I could thaw it in the microwave as well, but I just let it thaw overnight, usually in the fridge, and it's good to go. So, and it comes out perfect. I mean, there's somebody who was a subscriber to my meal plans once, and her husband was a serious chef, and he was a meat chef, but he could just not wrap his mind around the idea of boiling rice and cooking it that way. And he was so focused on it, he could not eat the rice and not notice that it had been cooked the wrong way. But I guess I'm more forgiving. I don't mind, but I really don't think it actually alters the taste very much at all. And here I am making soup in a mess all at the same time. There we
Well,
go.
People can, if they want, I don't know if you have this where you live in Canada, but we have stores like Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Sprouts, even the regular store that have cooked organic rice. And you can
Oh, that's so interesting.
you can take white or brown, and just in 3 minutes, you have a delicious serving of rice.
Oh yes, I remember seeing at Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. When I lived in California, I have fond memories of shopping there with my daughter because she was just a toddler. She was 18 months, and they had these little carts, and she was pushing her little carts and getting her own groceries. And they had stickers at the cash register also, which was genius. But yeah, I do remember seeing brown rice there, and yeah, why not? What other kinds of whole cooked plant foods do you have access to that we're missing out on here?
Well, I mean, things like canned beans. I'm sure you have canned beans, right? They even come salt-free if people don't want to cook their own beans from scratch, for example, as a backup.
Yes.
Things like that.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Nothing wrong with canned beans. I'm a big believer.
We even have here, you can get, like at Sprouts and Whole Foods, shredded hash browns, frozen, nothing in them, just potatoes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would take a special kind of freezer to achieve that, because you need to freeze them really quick, right? My mom lives by herself now, and she has this big, a normal size fridge, but for her it's huge, and she can dry her asparagus, put it on a nice baking tray and put it, but unfortunately my freezer is really full, so I can't freeze vegetables properly. But I'm guessing at an industrial scale, they can do everything. So that is very sweet. So I'm starting the soup here. I have onion, because every soup starts with an onion. I know some people have intolerance to onions, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, because onions add so much flavor, so much sweetness, to say nothing of the health benefits. And I just wish that everybody who's got an intolerance to onions could find a way outside of it. Otherwise,
you have, like, do you speak French? Do you have a slight French accent?
Oh, it's my first language.
Okay.
The
reason I said that, because you mentioned onion, and if somebody has a true allergy, okay, that's one thing. But for people that, I was once told by a French chef that my philosophy is that everything starts with an onion. And he said to me that the foundation of French cooking is an onion. Yeah. The foundation of all cooking is an onion.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that some people have serious issues with onions, but I really wonder if, after eating a whole foods plant-based diet for a few years, if their problem would be resolved. How much of that intolerance to onion is related to just like the gastrointestinal system not being used to dealing with plants. My buzzer for the quinoa went off, so I'm just going to take my big pot of quinoa here. I'm going to turn off the heat first. And I'm just going to drain it back in the same fine mesh metal sieve that I used earlier to rinse it. So I don't need to remove every last drop of water, but 99%. Give it a little shake like this. So I can see that there's red lentils in there, but they're really camouflaged with, there we go. And when it's done, I'll show you. For now, I'm just gonna put this back here with the lid on. So the heat is off, but it will make the fluffiest quinoa ever without having had to measure anything. The other reason I like doing this is because I don't like the risk of having walked away and coming back, especially when I had younger kids. There's some drama happening in a room and you go over there and you come back and, oh no, the quinoa has stuck to the bottom of the pot, right? This is never going to happen with this approach. So it's good for anybody who's caregiving or has to attend some kinds of emergencies. Okay, so soup, yes, indeed. Onion, celery, and carrot are the triad that starts practically every meal in the Italian culture, in the French culture. In French, it's called mirepoix. I have no idea where that word comes from. Mirepoix, it's a beautiful word. And I'm going to make this soup so stupidly easy. I'm just going to put a bag of frozen vegetables in there. I'm going to rinse them because I don't cook in flip-flops. I shouldn't be wearing flip-flops. I forgot to put on shoes. I was so excited to be here. So I have this bag of frozen vegetables. What is it? Classic mixed vegetables. There's something I love to do in the Vegan Family Kitchen. It's called the Vegan Pantry Challenge. It's on my website. If you search Vegan Pantry Challenge, I think you'll stumble upon my website pretty quick. And I just get people to cook with what they have for as long as you can. And the goal is not to end up with barley and ketchup for dinner. I would not want anybody to do that, but just get used to exploring your pantry, looking at what you have, trying to make the most of what you've already bought, because people think of their kitchen and the kitchen being expensive. The appliances are expensive or my fancy countertops. But what really has the most value is the food that we have. And many years back, I don't wish that upon my worst enemy, I had a pantry moth infestation. And that happens when you have a box of crackers that you forget in the back of the cabinet and you forget it for so long, and then bugs start coming out of it. And it's not because your kitchen is otherwise unclean. It's not that there's anything wrong with the manufacturer. There's pantry moth eggs everywhere. And if you leave them for long enough, they will bloom into little butterflies that are not really pretty. And so now I have a much better habit of making sure to rotate my inventory. And I was just showing my jars. When this jar is empty, I'm not going to just refill it with more quinoa. I'm going to wash it first so that whatever dust is at the bottom is washed. But also if there's any pantry moths, eggs, they will go away at that time. And at that time, because of the pantry moth infestation, I had to replace all my food. It was crazy. Even cans of beans, there would be eggs behind the paper labels.
Oh, wow. Oh,
it's so gross. Also in the, if you have adjustable shelves, there would be little eggs laid in the little holes for the adjustable shelves. It's a major disaster. So you don't want that to happen to you. So it's really important to constantly keep an eye on your food inventory. And so if there's any problem, you can nip it in the bud. I'm vegan, but I have no sentiments for the preservation of pantry moths. I don't think there should be a pantry moth rescue society. So I just want to make sure that we get rid of that stuff as soon as possible. So Vegan Pantry Challenge, cook with what you have. And so for me today, I was thinking, what can I use for this demo? Well, I have a bag of frozen vegetables, so let's use that. What else am I going to put in my soup? So I've got the vegetables there. I'm going to rinse them. I'm going to show you because they're quite sad. I don't know how long I've had them for. They've been infested with ice, but I'll just rinse them quick. And they're going to be as good as new. It's just soup. It's not going to be anything fancy. And I'm not going to think about that when I have it in my lunch tomorrow. I will just be really grateful that I have soup. So I'm going to put this in my slow cooker. Can you see my slow cooker?
yes.
Yeah. Okay, there it is.
I see you have a slow cooker. Do you also have an Instant Pot?
I do. And I admit that I don't use it a lot for batch cooking. I find that This is really completely hands off. I just put the thing in it, put the lid on, and it makes me feel good. I walk away for 7 hours or 6 hours, and I really don't need to attend it. The Instant Pot, I feel I need to keep a little bit of an eye on it just in case there's something wrong with the seal, or if I've had some issues with my not the burner, but the element at the bottom ones. So I find that for batch cooking, this one, I just set it and forget it. The flavors develop. I do like when I'm really doing a big batch of something, using the saute mode on the Instant Pot to get things started. And then I can cook everything in there and it's more flavorful. But for just soup, this is I think I got it for $20 at the local hardware store, and it does the job. Everybody that's a complete beginner can use this. It's not scary. So that's why it's my favorite tool to use with the meal plans and for complete beginners. I know you're a big Instant Pot
Yeah.
lover.
I do like the slow cooker, but you can't have it ready quickly. So you have to plan in advance.
Yes, absolutely. So that's why it's really a good batch cooking tool, right? That's where it comes in. So soup is a good opportunity, slow cooked soup, to have lentils. I've just measured a cup of brown lentils here. Again, rinsing them in my fine mesh metal sieve. Super simple. Yes, there you go. There's so many people that are sadly scared of the Instant Pot. Almost every week I have somebody who tells me, oh, I bought an Instant Pot, but I haven't used it yet. And I think I have a webinar replay somewhere on my website about how to just get really basic started with the Instant Pot and also convert recipes. That's another thing that I think people need to understand. Just like you need to understand how to make soup, well, understand how to convert a recipe from Instant Pot to slow cooker to stovetop and back. And once you understand how the thing works, you don't need to follow the recipe to the T anymore. With Instant Pot, you want to get in the right ballpark for cooking time. But once you understand how the gizmo works, you have a lot more freedom in changing ingredients and so forth. What else am I going to put in this lovely soup? I have my hand on turmeric. I feel like turmeric will be a good addition to this. And I'm not going to use a real measuring spoon. I'm just using about a teaspoon turmeric here. And because it's turmeric, I like to tell people turmeric, pepper. Don't forget the pepper. Think of them together in your brain always. Where's my pepper? Does anybody see the pepper? Here it is. So turmeric pepper, the pepper is really essential to get the flavors from not the flavors, to get the powerful antioxidants. I'm going to use, so I don't, is this brand available in the US? It's called Go Bio. I think it's a Canadian brand.
I don't think so. I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, bouillon cubes. It's similar to, there's an American brand called Harvest something that looks like this, but I'm using 2 cubes. I would love to be the person who makes her own broth, but I'm just not at this time in my life, unfortunately. And so I have no space in my fridge or my freezer or my time schedule for making my own broth. I know it's easy, but ask me again in 3 years. So I'm just happy to cut the broth, the bouillon cubes here, put them here, and I'm going to add, and I told you I'm not I measure by my kettle here. So my kettle says there's about 5 cups of water, and that's what I'm putting in. I like to heat up the water so it gets the slow cooker started faster. There we go. And I'm going to add a can of tomatoes, which adds umami. These are no salt added 365, same as you got in the US. Little tomatoes, so just a can. We'll add, some umami, some nutrients as well, of course. And is there something else I could add to this? I will add some cumin and just cumin. Since I've put in the turmeric, I think it will add. So again, that looks like about 2 teaspoons cumin to me. I love cumin. Meal plan subscribers will tell you that the standard measurement of cumin for me is like a tablespoon because I really love the stuff. And I'm just going to give it a good stir. Did I forget something? garlic, onion, frozen vegetables, brown lentils, broth, and a can of tomatoes. When this is done in about 6-7 hours, I'm going to add, very important, some greens. And they can be just greens from like a box, you know, pre-washed greens. That's perfectly fine. And I'm also going to add lemon juice, and the lemon juice will add, will balance the different tastes of the ingredients, add flavor, but also help with iron absorption, which is really key since there's all those lentils in there. So we want to make sure to get the most out of our nutrients. And I hear my oven, so I know I have to check what's going on in there with those sweet potatoes and flip my tofu. I think the sweet potatoes are done. Danger of cooking with glasses. And I'm going to bring the tofu and just flip it and put it back for 5 minutes. So this is what the tofu looks like. I hope you can see properly. I'm just going to really quickly flip it with the finger method. It's hot, but it's manageable. If you're worried about your fingers, you can use a spatula. That's okay too. But I like to have that physical experience of my food.
It looks delicious. So you have Whole Foods in Canada, but not Trader Joe's. Is that correct?
Correct. There's actually a really funny story where, because a lot of people in Vancouver, we're quite close to Bellingham. In Bellingham, Washington, there's a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, sorry. And so many people from Vancouver are used, especially in the days when it was really easy to cross the border, you know, make a Trader Joe's run and buy some candy or something. And they've never ever tried to have a store in Vancouver, but somehow they got really upset when this man started a store that was called Pirate Joe. And he was crossing the border and buying all those things at full retail price at Trader Joe's in Bellingham and selling them in this tiny hole in the wall shop called Pirate Joe, where, you know, so people that wanted to have their fix of special gummy candy, I guess, I don't know, in Vancouver. And Trader Joe's went after him with the power of the law every way they could. And they could never stop him from continuing his Pirate Joe business. The courts were saying, you know, nice try, but you don't have a reason to do this, and he's not harming you. But he was even shopping at Trader Joe's with costumes. He would like dress up and put on the fake beard and stuff to get to buy the Trader Joe's. So that's how much people in Vancouver like Trader Joe's. Unfortunately, with the economic downturn, he had to close his shop because it was becoming too expensive to defend himself legally. But yeah, we love Trader Joe's. I haven't been there in a long time. I used to like their soy chorizo, but that's another like vegan meat product that's really quite oily. So we don't have a taste for that very much anymore. So other than that, yeah, I guess frozen things. What other whole ingredients do they have? They have nuts. I'm not sure what else they have that I would want to buy there anymore. Do you have suggestions?
Do you have Trader Joe's? Well, we love a product called Cruciferous Crunch, which is this finely chopped. It's green cabbage, purple cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli.
Oh, nice.
And what is and kale. My husband loves that. Do you have Costco?
Is that fresh?
It is
like
fresh. It's fresh.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We have Costco, and actually at Loblaws stores, which is like the really big Canadian chain. So they have all these different, you know, types of grocery stores, but they make this salad mix that sounds very much the same as this. I think it starts with you know how they sell broccoli crowns?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they use the broccoli stems as the starter for this thing, and then they add Brussels sprouts and red cabbage and all the other things in it. But I think that's their way to be zero waste, or that's what I like to think anyway. So we're doing well here. I'm just thinking I'm going to show you my quinoa so you can take my word that it is actually nice to have quinoa cooked this way. How do you cook quinoa, Chef AJ? What's your favorite way?
Guess what? My husband's allergic. We got 2 allergies.
Oh, no.
But I will tell you, I do sometimes have to cook it for classes. And so my favorite way is in the Instant Pot. For every cup of quinoa, every dry cup of quinoa, 1.5 cups of water and 1 minute at high pressure. So that is how I cook it. So very easy in the pressure cooker. It's such a quick cooking grain anyway.
Yes, totally. Yes. I guess if I was more diligent about remembering ratios, I would probably do that. So let me show you this. I'm not going to scrape the bottom of the pot here, just showing you. So this is, let me go back to showing myself, showing self view. There you go. So this is my quinoa. You can tell it's still steaming, but it's perfectly nice and fluffy. And that was the pasta method. So the one downside, my friend Anne-Marie Bonneau, who has the Zero Waste Chef website, would say this uses too much water. And I agree with her. It's a trade-off at that point. But for me, it's just an easy way when I'm monitoring multiple things at the time. I will try your Instant Pot approach, but I like doing it the pasta method. So let's get the potatoes out. Actually, I've got them out here already. And so the only thing I'm not going to do that I said I would maybe do, but keep for another day, is mixing a dressing. And I'm just going to say what I would have done.
Well, you know, if you want to mix it, there's time to show how fast it is. We don't want.
Okay, let's do it then.
Absolutely.
Okay, potatoes. Okay, so, okay. So the dressing, it's a dressing, it's a sauce, it's whatever you want to make it. And it's so much easier. And I mean, I'm sure you found that out too, the complete dairy-free whole plant food enabler to me has been the high power blender, whether it's a Vitamix or a Blendtec. And I love my baby Vitamix. I have the 64-ounce one here, and this is the baby. This one is 32-ounce, and I have one that's actually in between. I find it such an enabler to use whole foods where otherwise you would have had to use some more refined ingredients. So what I'm going to do, I like to call this my golden booster dressing, and it involves tahini, which is really just ground sesame. So there's nothing unwholesome about that. I'm lucky to have a big selection of Middle Eastern foods at my grocery store. And again, I'm eyeballing this, but it's about a 1/4 cup. And you have to be aware that the bottom often is a little sticky, it's like peanut butter, right? It settles, so the oils from the sesame are more on top. Okay, there we go. I'll lick the spoon later. The thing about the tahini is that it's slightly bitter, and it really, I guess you could get used to it, but for me, it really requires a touch of a sweetener, and that will be just a date. And I have these dates, they're not medjool dates. They're not like those super juicy, sweet, sticky dates. They're much harder than that, and they have pits. So make sure to remove the pit. They were a gift from a friend who went to the Middle East, and I love this friend and I love the gift, but the dates are really hard. So I'm going to use hot water to help soften them at the end. And the other thing I'm going to use is not whole lemon. I'm going to use lemon pulp, and I'm going to just, if you can see here, I have my lemon and I'm just roughly removing the peel. I know some people eat the lemon peel, but that's beyond me in terms of bitterness. And that way I can just put the whole lemon, including the pulp, not just the juice. I'm making sure that there's no more seeds. I can see a seed in there, because seeds are also very bitter. Lemon seeds, it wouldn't make my dressing really appealing. There we go. Okay, I think that's a pretty good chunk. I'll put another little piece here. There we go. Piece of lemon, straight in the blender. And what else am I going to add to this? Garlic powder. So I could use fresh garlic. However, because the sauce is going to sit for a few days in the fridge, I don't like using fresh garlic because I find that it ferments maybe, or it acquires a taste that is not my favorite. Whereas dehydrated garlic powder, this is garlic granules, works too. Just garlic pieces will prevent it from developing that taste. I will add miso paste for a little bit of saltiness, but that's a better choice than just salt. And it's probably about 1.5 teaspoons, maybe 2 teaspoons. Again, part of the key to batch cooking for me is to not get too many dishes dirty. And that's why I eyeball so many things. Because if I have to wash all the different measuring tools, I'm just not going to want to do it again next week. So I'm living with a little bit of imperfection for the purpose of making it happen. Again, turmeric and my golden booster sauce. Here we go. And pepper, I've just put the pepper in. So what I'm going to do, add to this is a little bit of hot water because my date was so hard. And then I'm going to blend it. So the amount of water is about 2/3 of a cup. I'm not sure how much I have, but we'll play it by ear. Where's the lid of my blender? Here we go. Okay, plug your ears. Just kidding, Zoom is awesome at removing big sounds. Let's start this. I think it's still a little too thick. Yeah, I've got a orange paste in there, so I'm going to add a little bit more water to mix in with, and I'll use hot water. If you have newer pipes, that's not a concern. If you have really old pipes, it's better to get hot water from the kettle. Up. Back in the blender.
That's delicious.
And here's the tofu. So that was about 40 minutes for the tofu. And some pieces were thinner, so they're going to be a little bit more chewy. For the most part, they're going to have that nice contrast that I mentioned between the tasty umami outside and the blander interior, the white. But right now it's super hot, so it's going to get a little bit harder as it cools off. So here's my sauce. It's still too thick. See, that's what happens when you don't measure. Sometimes you have to. Let's add another 100 mils. What's that? 3 ounces of water. There we go. And I'll turn off my oven. Et voila. So I have the golden dressing here. Oops. There we go. So that's going to be a great sauce to go in that bowl. I'm actually going to scrape this later to get everything out. I've got the quinoa, I've got the tofu, and let me show you, it's just too hot. It's not too hot. And I have the roasted sweet potatoes right here. And I have the quinoa too. So all of this happened in just about an hour, including a lot of chit-chatting. So it's not that hard. You do it with someone friendly like Chef AJ, or you can repeat this same batch cooking with me, watching this again now that you know what to do. And you have a lot of food ready for the weekend, and you have the soup ready for the week. And then you have the soup that will be ready in 6 or 7 hours. Add the greens, add the lemon juice, and you've got some really delicious whole foods based meals for the whole week without too much stress.
And you have fun doing it.
Yeah, you know, it's not fun like, you know, going to Playland. Playland in Vancouver is like the, you know, the rides, you know, going to Disney. Going to Disney is fun, you know, but it doesn't feed you whole foods plant-based every day of the week. So it's a trade-off. I don't want to be flippant about it. There's an aspect of doing your own batch cooking that, yes, takes effort. But it's good effort. It's effort that we need to put in, because what's the alternative? The alternative when we have no control over our diet is to end up eating food that people made for us, but without really caring about us. And the price of that is, and of course, eating a healthy vegan diet is not necessarily a silver bullet that will take care of everything, but it certainly is proven to decrease our risk of getting chronic disease, of dealing with dementia. And so the time we're putting in here is time that maybe we won't have to put in later as caregivers or as people, patients going to medical appointments and all that. So, you know, I'm betting on myself by creating this really delicious food and increasing my odds of living a long, healthy life and being able to make really good food for my loved ones. Here we go. Look at that.
And
Here are all my friends.
About how long will you keep these items in your fridge, and will you freeze any of them?
To be perfectly honest, I think most of this is going to be eaten tonight. It would not normally be the case, but I didn't do batch cooking this weekend because ironically it was Mother's Day. And on Mother's Day, the mother did not do the cooking for the week, and now it's playing catch up. So when I was thinking, what am I going to cook for Chef AJ? I was thinking, well, if I do these things, it will help me. So the sweet potatoes we're probably going to have as a bowl with the quinoa and the tofu tonight. But then I'm going to use maybe brown rice that I have in the freezer with some black beans and the sweet potatoes as well to make burritos or tacos or something like that. Maybe adding some jackfruit at the last minute, just tossing the jackfruit inside the air fryer. And the soup is going to be eaten throughout the week, you know, probably 4 or 5 solid lunches there. So it won't get frozen. I could freeze the quinoa, certainly. I could freeze the soup. The sweet potatoes could be frozen, but I don't think it would improve them greatly. And the tofu, I've never tried because it just gets eaten so quickly. So I'm not totally sure. I think it wouldn't improve also because the physical structure, the molecular structure of the tofu would probably be impacted by freezing. It wouldn't be bad, but it's definitely better when it's fresh. But definitely the quinoa, definitely the soup. Those are 100% easy to freeze. The sauce as well, the dressing could totally be frozen. That would actually be a good idea because I don't know why I have this hang up about making dressing. Often I just don't feel like making it. And then I'm standing at the grocery store looking at the dressings and thinking, oh, none of this looks like something I want to eat. So why don't I just make my own? It takes like 2 minutes. It's really those silly little things. Like every night I have a moment of resistance about making my breakfast, you know, for the next day. I'm like, oh, why don't I just go read now? I'm done. You know, I think we have also something I didn't mention, why we hate to cook. We feel we want to be taken care of. We want somebody else to take care of us by making the food for us. Maybe it's the little child within that needs that love that comes from having food made for them. And that's why we so often end up ordering food from the outside. And that's really unfortunate because as we've gone over, those people don't actually love us. So we have to parent ourselves a little bit and make our own really good, healthy food and get over that resistance and say, it's okay. You deserve love. And I'm going to give you love and make you a good breakfast. I'm going to make you a good dinner. I'm going to do the batch cooking for you so you can enjoy those beautiful, healthy lunches throughout the week and give back to the world all the energy that comes in the food and all the people that have been involved in growing the food and transporting it and the sun and the stars and the rain and everything. So when we feel connected to the universe like that, I think it's easier to remember how important this is and to just do it.
Yep. And you're giving yourself and your family the gift of health.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is a wonderful presentation. If people are more interested in your work or to follow you, where can I send them?
Well, Vegan Family Kitchen is a really great place to connect to get started. And I want to say I did this writing project this year that I'm so proud of, and that's been super fun to write. And the feedback from the people that have signed up to read it has been amazing. It's based on my book. So my book is called Flow in the Kitchen, and it tackles a lot of those mindset aspects that I've talked about and also explains the syntax of cooking. You know, how do you make soup? How do you make pizza dough? How do you make a stir fry? What is the structure of those? But I wanted to go further and to make it really easy to digest, to make it no nonsense, to do a little bit of learning every day. because it's like a practice. It's like meditation. You can't meditate all of January and be done for the year. You know, you need to do a little bit every day to reap the benefits. And it's the same for learning. So I've broken down Flow in the Kitchen into 100 days of Flow in the Kitchen. And when people sign up, it costs, I think, $12 or something. Anyway, and they get one little email that takes 1 minute per day to read for 100 days. And every day there's a little tidbit of learning about the mindset of cooking, about the structure of cooking, about nutrition, about different aspects, about cookware, about all the basics for healthy vegan cooking. And I've just enjoyed this so much. So I think if anybody wants to try working with me in this really like light touch kind of way, it's a really great place to start. So on my website, veganfamilykitchen.com, just go under work with me, I guess, and it's going to be there 100 days of Flow in the Kitchen.
Nice. Thank you so much, Brigitte.
It's my pleasure. I just want to say thank you to everybody who cares enough about cooking really good food to show up here and watch this show and your other episodes and to keep on learning, because it does make a difference in the world. But I want to say, as long as you actually go and cook. So don't just watch this and think it was great. No, I want you to be inspired and go in the kitchen and cook, and it will make a big difference in the world. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for Vinegar Spice and Everything Nice. And Nick DeVorn of Local Spicery is going to making the best no tuna salad. Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.